Hey guys, Pastor Tanner here. Part 3 of sermon prep on Mark chapter 12, verses 18 to 27, the first sermon on this text. Hoping to finish this sermon off tonight or at least make significant progress to where I'm just buttoning up some of the final details. For those who haven't been with us, because the dead are raised, we ought to live is my proposition, sermon titled Life to Come. Talking about subjects like the resurrection, talking about subjects like heaven, and also embracing the movement that we have even now towards eternity. So those are some of the directions we're going. And made good progress so far, especially for a Wednesday. Usually not this far along by this point in the week, but it's good to get ahead. I'm a procrastinator by nature. I'm trying to kill some of my procrastination. So let's get the passage guide going. We had done a search yesterday on what is heaven like, and we had some good results there. Yep. And so that's the direction we're going. Got me a little bit of tea, peach white tea. Not the best, but nice and refreshing. And yeah, as always, feel free to interact with me in chat, and we can go from there. All right. So if I'm trying to finish it tonight, I'm gonna try to work through it from the beginning. You kind of have two introductions to your sermon. You have your pre-text reading introduction, and that's supposed to incline people, prepare their hearts to read the text. And then you have an actual homiletical introduction. So I'm going to try to sort through both right now. Sean the Gamer, hey Tanner. Sean, thanks for swinging by. Appreciate that. And so there are two general introductions that we need to work towards. And the first one is going to be the text introduction, and I'm going to talk about how there are two main points that Jesus brings up to the Sadducees, and he explicitly tells them they don't know the scriptures or the power of God. And my point in this sermon is going to be that I'm focusing on the fact that they don't know the power of God. So that's what this sermon is going to be about. And then the sermon next week is going to be about the fact that they don't know the scriptures. So both are essential, and both are found in this text. So this is going to be what I say in the beginning. Hey, Jesus has a problem with them because they don't know the scriptures or the power of God. Today we're focusing on the power of God. Next week, know the scriptures. So, and this is all going to be pre-text reading introduction, so that it gives them something to look for while we read the text. They can actually begin to think about it, and as I'm reading the text, they'll recognize these words in there. So that's what you start out with. So I'm just I have to think about this as I formulate it. So let's go to the text. Mark 12, and starting in 18. Then the Sadducees, who say there is no resurrection, came to him with a question. Teacher, they said, Moses wrote for us that if a man's brother dies and leaves a wife but no children, the man must marry the widow and raise up offspring for his brother. Now there were 7 brothers. The first one married and died without leaving any children. The second one married the widow, but he also died, leaving no child. It was the same with the third. In fact, none of the 7 left any children. Last of all, the woman died too. At the resurrection, whose wife will she be, since the 7 were married to her? Jesus replied, Are you not in error because you do not know the Scriptures or the power of God? When the dead rise, they will neither marry nor be given in marriage. They will be like the angels in heaven. Now about the dead rising. Have you not read in the book of Moses, in the account of the burning bush, how God said to him, I am the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob? He is not God of the dead, but of the living. You are badly mistaken. So, that's what I'll be reading to them. And the purpose with the first introduction is to prepare their hearts to read that, to hear those scriptures. And so I need to mention also that it's not just the Sadducees, because I've been talking about Pharisees, I've been talking about people week after week that have been challenging Jesus. So, Jesus as king, first, Pharisees, now Sadducees. And I can also talk about how these are very different groups of people. You know, in our head, we might think that Pharisees and Sadducees are quite similar. There aren't many differences between them, but there are in fact profound differences between Pharisees and Sadducees. And so all of these are going to be helpful, I think, for me to bring up. So I'll mention that. This week, the Sadducees take a shot at Jesus. Last week it was the Pharisees, this week it's the Sadducees. And Jesus has 2 remarks for these Sadducees. First, he says they don't know the scriptures. Second, he says they don't know the power of God. Now, I want to deal with Jesus' remarks in 2 different sermons. So we're going to split this text into 2 weeks. In week 1, that's this week, we will deal with the fact that Jesus says they don't know the power of God. Next week, we're going to deal with the fact that Jesus says they don't know the scriptures. And that'll be kind of my pretext introduction. And then I'll say something like, without further ado, let's get into the text. Follow along with me in your Bibles, the book of Mark, chapter 12, verses 18 to 27. And then I'll read it. And so these points right here will get me to that point that I can say all of those things. Now, one other thing I need is before I get up to preach, I also read a different section of scripture. So we need to go through our cross references. We have plenty, and we need to establish from our cross references something that would be beneficial and helpful to read early on. So let's see. These cross references are simply the equivalent text in the book of Matthew, and I'm just preaching out of Mark. Stannis the Fewer, peace be with you. Stannis, good to see you again, brother. Appreciate you being here. Stannis says, not sure I'll be much help at the moment. I am working. No problem, Stannis. I appreciate you dropping in regardless. I'm just starting to clarify everything. I'm hoping to finish the sermon today. We'll see if I can finish it. But what this takes is me going into a lot more detail in terms of what each individual point means. I've established a broad outline, but I need to get the details solidified now. So that's what I'm working on right now, Stannis. Thanks for swinging by. Appreciate it. So each of these are simply the equivalent texts in Matthew and Luke, so we don't need to reference those. Here is the text itself on Levirate marriage. Now, if I read that mid-sermon, or I'm sorry, mid-service, I'm going to have to explain it, because that's a practice we don't practice at all in the modern day and age. And so if I read Deuteronomy 25:5, you know, after singing a couple worship songs, I'm gonna have to go into a lot of detail about what Levirate marriage is, how it functioned, why God established it, and so that may raise a lot of questions that don't need to be raised. Let's see this one. I am the God of your father. This might be a good one. Exodus 3:6. See, this one I could just bring up Moses and the burning bush, and I can say, here's what God did, here's what he established with Moses. That might be a good one. I'll put that in my back pocket for now. Let's look at this next one. 2 Corinthians 12:2-4. No man in Christ who 14 years ago was caught up to the third heaven Whether it was in the body or out of the body, I do not know. God knows. And I know this man, whether in the body or apart from the body, I do not know, but God knows, was caught up to paradise and heard inexpressible things, things that no one is permitted to tell. So some of my sermon is going to be about what is heaven like. So this might get people interested. The thing is, you can get people's attention with a lot of stuff, but you want to make sure the thing you use to grab people's attention, you deliver on, right? It's disingenuous to try and grab people's attention and then not actually deliver on it. So the question I have for myself, is my text more about the living God who appeared to Moses at the burning bush, or is it more about what heaven is going to be like? My third point is God is life. So I'm leaning towards Exodus. Let's look at a couple more of these. Philippians 3:20. Our citizenship is in heaven. We eagerly await the Savior from there, the Lord Jesus Christ, who by the power that enables him to bring everything under his control will transform our lowly bodies so that they will be like his glorious body. Hebrews 9:24. For Christ did not enter a sanctuary made with human hands that was only a copy of the true one. He entered heaven itself now to appear for us in God's presence. I'm really leaning towards Exodus. But that'll require some explanation too. And I don't know that I should be explaining a lot of my sermon mid-service. It's the sort of thing that you develop and shed light upon after you start preaching. Here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to put both texts there, and I'm going to give myself the option to pick one or the other. Now, one or the other might become more obviously clear to me as I do this prep, or I might, in the moment, kind of decide which direction I want to take it. I don't recommend this for new public speakers, but I've had enough experience that I don't mind ad hocing a little bit. And so I'll put both scriptures down, and I'll kind of know that I can pick one or the other. That feels like the best solution for now without getting completely bogged down in these details. So my two options are, I believe it was Exodus 3:6. So I got Exodus 3:6, and I've also got 2 Corinthians 12:2-4. Second Corinthians 12:2-4. Yeah, because that'll grab people's attention. Okay, so I give myself a couple options. I can think about it more. These things don't have to be decided right now. There we go. That's what I'm looking for. Okay, so this is the mid-service text, one of these. This is the pre-sermon. These are the pre-sermon points. Boom, 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 boom. And then I will read the text, Mark 12:18-27. Ready to go. Then I will pray. And after I pray, there needs to be something gripping right off the bat to grab people's interest. And I think it's these right here. I can mention that there are various views surrounding the afterlife. I can talk about how some people believe in reincarnation. Some people believe you're just dead and it's over. I do in this sermon need to bring up the YouTube video I watched this week where philosopher wrote about death now 97. I watched a YouTube video this week where there's a philosopher, secular philosopher, who used to teach at a prestigious university, and he wrote about death when he was in like his 30s. And he essentially wrote, nobody should be afraid of death. It's not that big a deal. And when you die, you're just dead. And he's now 97. And they did an interview with him. What do you think about what you wrote back in your youth? And he basically said it's all hogwash and death is terrifying, which is very interesting for a secular philosopher. Um, it's easy to say death's no big deal when you're 30. It's much harder to say death is no big deal when you're 97. Stannis says transmigration is the actual term for reincarnation, but maybe you don't want to get that deep. I'm going to put that down, Stannis, just to have it. But you're right, especially in the introduction, you're just trying to get people's attention. And a lot of people would have heard of the word reincarnation. They would have an idea in their head already. And I'm just trying to grab their attention and get them thinking about the afterlife in general. And it's usually not the time to go into a deep definitional type of thing. But it's good for me to know that information. And so I'm going to put it off to the side here. I'm going to, I don't know when I'm going to tell that story. It might go better with a main point. It might go better with one of the main points down here. Or it might go great in the introduction. Not sure. So I've got most of my intro in. So let me think how this will flow. I'll read the text. I'll finish praying and I'll say something like, there are various views of the afterlife. If you ask many different people, they have different opinions. Some people believe you're reincarnated, that depending on the life you lived here, you have an opportunity to come back as a different animal or, a different person. Some people believe you're just dead, that it's over. You had your chance, you lived your life, and that's it. Once you're dead, it's over. And there are many views in between, views of purgatory and purification, blah, blah, blah. The fact of the matter is that, so how do I go? How do I go from, because I'm going to be rambling about various views to, I need to make it relevant to us. Stannis says, regardless though, I don't like to think of it now that I follow Jesus. Yeah, very good point, Stannis. Very good point. So I'll be rambling about various views. I'll be talking about different ideas that people have. And then I need to take that information and turn it towards why should we be even be thinking about these things this morning? Why should we be considering them this morning? So I think I need to put something like philosophical exercise, more than a philosophical. I need to say something like, guys, this is more than a philosophical exercise. Your views on the afterlife will change how you live in this life. Your views on an afterlife change how you live this life. So I can say that. And given how this is flowing, I think I'm going to take my little philosopher illustration. I'm going to insert it in my first main point instead. Your views on an afterlife change how you live this life. And then you tie it to the text. How do your comments now, Pastor, relate to the text you're going to preach on? This was the case for the Sadducees. Okay, so I'm tying it to the text. Stannis says, maybe focus on Jesus and not other viewpoints, helping you bring your ideas together. They are neat, but can be distractions. Yeah, very good point, Stannis. If you go into too much detail into the various ideas, it ends up being distractions for people and they can't focus in on the main point. The main point that we want to get across in the intro is discussing the afterlife is important and you need to listen to this. You need to hear this. You want people to be leaning forward in their seats saying, I got to hear what this guy has to say. I have to hear this message. This is important for me. That's the attitude you want people to have by the time you get towards the end of your introduction. And you want them to feel like this scripture, this Bible is going to help me answer this question. Those are the things you're looking for. And so, yeah, I can't go into too much detail on these other ideas because they'll distract. Stannis says some included into their beliefs because it is neat. Right, right. So there are various views, and I'll just mention a couple of them, but I'm not going to go into detail. And then I'm going to say this is more than a philosophical exercise, guys. Your views on the afterlife affect how you live in this life. They actually mean something. This is the case for the Sadducees, after all. These people came, they questioned Jesus, and they tried to trip him up with some philosophical exercise, sure. But the fact of the matter is they lived their life based upon these ideas. So Jesus challenges them about the afterlife, and in doing so, he challenges us. I want to ask you this morning, do you believe in an afterlife? Really believe it, not just say you believe it because you think about it, but do you actually believe it? And if someone were to witness your actions in life, would they say that you believe it? We have a very simple message for us today. Jesus makes it quite clear that there is an afterlife. And he says this, because the dead are raised, we ought to live. And you see, I can start folding right into my proposition. Because the dead are raised, we ought to live. Got a very simple outline for us today. First, we're going to look at the fact that the dead are raised. The Pharisees didn't believe it. Jesus did believe it. We ought to believe it too. I'll talk about the dead are raised. Second, I'm going to talk about the life to come. What is it like? What does it mean? How the life to come is, what it's like, is going to affect how we live. And then finally, we're going to look at the underpinning of the entire doctrine, the fact that God is life. So those are the three places we're going. And you can see we're folding right nicely right into the sermon. I'm going to flip these because Sadducees, I'm going to flip these in the intro. Right now I have that it's more than a philosophical exercise. Your views on an afterlife change how you live in this life. This was the case for the Sadducees. To be honest, the Sadducees mostly treated this like a philosophical exercise. So I'm actually going to put the comment about them first. There are various views surrounding the afterlife, blah, 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 blah. This was the case for the Sadducees. And then I can talk about what they believed about the afterlife. And then I can say, they're trying to trip Jesus up. And then I can say, but guys, this is more than a philosophical exercise. This is important. I think that flows nicer. It makes more logical sense. Perfect. And just give me 1 second here. I will be right back. All right, I'm back. Sorry about that. I'm back. I'm back. Okay, so I like this for the intro. I think it flows well. I think it's logical. I think it ties in, and I think it grabs interest, which is your whole goal in the introduction. I'll grab people's interest. They'll say, man, I got to listen to this. I got to hear what this message is about. And they're going to get the impression the scriptures answer this difficult question for us. So I'm happy with where the intro's at. I don't think I need to go into any more detail on it. So let's go to the first main point. The dead are raised. First, the dead are raised. And I think right out the gate is where I can give kind of the Sadducees background and their belief system. Because I will have just talked about the Sadducees a little bit, people will have heard them mentioned, and they are going to get some interesting information now. It's this type of information, detailed information, that you kind of want to give at the front of the sermon, because that's when, after you've grabbed people's interest, people can only absorb so much intellectual data, right? And you want to give that right up front after you've grabbed their attention, where they're at the peak of their interest, they're at the height of their interest, and hit them quick with the facts, the information, and then kind of pull out from that. You don't want to just, if you just hammer people with tons of information, the brain can't absorb all that stuff. So you want to give it to them quick, give them the relevant information, the important information, that's going to be helpful for the sermon. So right off the bat, I'll have their interest, and I can tell them, hey, this is what the Sadducees were like, guys. And they'll be like, oh, that's interesting. So let's go. I've already gotten some notes on the Sadducees, and let's just go grab our notes. Sadducees attributed all events to human free will. Sadducees affirmed the authority of the written Torah alone. Sadducees denied all three. What did they deny? They denied the existence of angels, demons, and the resurrection from the dead. The Pharisees were less restrictive and more tolerant than the Sadducees, whose exclusive reliance on the Torah and allegiance to Rome resulted in theological and political conservatism. The resurrected life, continues Jesus, is not a prolongation of earthly life, but an entirely new dimension of existence. So these were some ideas that I've grabbed from my previous research yesterday. So if I go here, I can give some of that information. And I can mention the Pharisees and how they're different. Ooh, and you know what's going to be an interesting tie is the Sadducees' belief system in regards to all of this stuff is quite similar to the belief system of many in our current day and age. The Sadducees didn't believe in an afterlife. So too many atheists in our day and age, and many, people that we interact with don't believe in an afterlife either. So this will actually be a nice tie-in for helping people out. So let's go back here. Angels, demons, resurrection, and then Torah. Those are the most important ones for my sermon. Angels, demons, resurrection, Torah. So these are the most essential aspects about their belief system. So, first, because the dead are raised, we ought to live. First, the dead are raised. This is something that Jesus teaches here, but the Sadducees didn't believe. Let's learn a little bit about the Sadducees. That'll help us to understand why he said what he said. Then I can go into this. Many in our day and age believe similarly to the Sadducees about the afterlife. How can we reach them? And then all of a sudden, I'm 15 minutes into the sermon and I'm already getting intensely practical. People will begin to think, okay, this is relevant to my life. My aunt believes that. My brother-in-law thinks that way. And they can start trying to come up with, they can think together with me about some of the implications of that idea, of these ideas. Okay. And that's where I come up with my two subpoints. Jesus meets them where they're at, and Jesus challenges them directly. And the application is going to be in your interactions with people. You need to both meet them where they're at and challenge them directly. Both need to take place. Now, which one's first? Do we want to hit with the hammer first, or do we want to be gentle first? My gut says be gentle first. Meet them where they're at. Because we can talk about a lot under that heading that really captivates people and interests people. And once we've talked about that, then I can start talking about, but once you've met them where they're at, you also need to be willing to challenge. Yeah, I think that's the order. Who would have thought studying the obscure religious beliefs of a small group that lived 2,000 years ago would be so relevant for us today? I mean, who cares what Sadducees thought about the world 2,000 years ago? Oh, wait, the Sadducees think about the world in almost precisely the same way that many people do today. I love the timeless relevancy of the Bible and the scriptures. I think I think D.A. Carson wrote a book called The Abiding Relevancy of the Christian Scriptures or something, or I think he was the editor on it. I like that title. Stannis asks, would you call it materialism? I think they look very similar. In fact, think about the things that the Sadducees denied. They denied the existence of angels, they denied the existence of demons, and they denied the existence of the resurrection. So they had an inherent materialism. That's a good way to put it. And I know you don't mean this, but we don't mean materialism in the sense of materialistic, like they like material goods. No, but the philosophical ideals of materialism, i.e., there's no such thing as the spiritual realm. And I think the Sadducees had a lot of beliefs that inclined towards denying the spiritual realm that are very similar to what people today do. So, yeah, materialism in the philosophical sense, absolutely. A lot of similarities there. So, I'm going to ask the question, how can we reach them? Let's look at the strategies Jesus used. Strategy number 1, he meets them where they're at. Look with me in verse 26. And then I can go into a bunch of detail on that. But Jesus doesn't just meet them where they're at. Strategy number 2, challenge them directly. Boom. Verse 26. Man, this is already coming together. I like how this is developing. Here's the one bad thing about finishing a sermon this early. By the time Sunday rolls around, you kind of forget it. In sermon preparation, you're kind of absorbing the material as you go through it, and it's taking up your mind, your thoughts, your heart. And then if you don't look at it for 4 or 5 days, it's not as potent. It's not as immediately relevant to your mind, and that affects how you preach. So you've also, once you put this together, you've also kind of got to step back a little bit and sort through some of the material again and again. You got to keep it fresh in your mind and in your heart. Otherwise, you won't deliver it with as much power. Stannis says John 20:29. Let's check that out. John 20:29. Then Jesus told him, because you have seen me, you have believed. Blessed are those who have not seen and yet have believed. Nice. That's a good one. And that's encouraging for us in our day and age as well. Stannis says, that's for the materialist. Yeah, very good point. Because you have seen me, you have believed. Blessed are those who have not seen and yet have believed. Absolutely. Ooh, that tea is cold. I'll be right back. I'm going to heat this tea up in the microwave. Sorry about that, guys. Cold tea, not my jam. I'm back now. Stannis says, I think anyone that appeals to evidence go against this verse. There was a whole thing revealed to me by the Holy Spirit on this. Not sure you'd want to get into that, though. I think anyone that appeals to evidence goes against this verse. You mean tries to use evidence to appeal to an unbeliever? Is that what you mean, Stannis? Much more better. Okay. So number one, Jesus meets the Sadducees where they're at. Number two, Jesus challenges them directly. And these are going to be my two subpoints. Under the dead are raised. And then my application are going to be twofold. Believe that the dead are raised, and teach others that the dead are raised. And I can talk about how this is part of gospel proclamation. Let's see, Stannis says, I think using evidence like a non-believer on matters of faith to try and conform to their ways of thinking as a form of persuasion, I believe is a form of compromise on our part. Absolutely. Agreed 100%, Stannis. Have you read any Greg Bahnsen? Greg Bahnsen talks about that extensively, and I think he's dead on. We essentially capitulate to their way of thinking. It's the idea of God being in the dock that C.S. Lewis talked about. Oh, you haven't read Greg Bahnsen? You would love Greg Bahnsen. Greg Bahnsen, I'll just put his name down. You should really look into him. He's excellent, and he talks extensively about what you're saying right there. Greg Bahnsen. Bold. Right there. Check him out. He's awesome, and you'd really like him, Stannis. John 20:29 is the reason I go against evidence preaching. Yeah, it's a very good point. Let me look. I probably have the Greg Bahnsen wrote a book called Presuppositional Apologetics, and he actually talks Yeah, I've already got this. Check this out. I'm gonna find you a quote that you'll love. Yeah, this is great. Here, I'm gonna blow this up and make this big. Open a floating window. Listen to this. This is so good. You're gonna love this section, Stannis. Who shall judge? This is Greg Bahnsen, and he quotes C.S. Lewis extensively here. The circumstance in which we find ourselves defending the Christian faith is aptly described by C.S. Lewis. The ancient man approached God, or even the gods, as an accused person approaches his judge. For the modern man, the roles are reversed. He is the judge, God is in the dock. The trial may even end in God's acquittal, but the important thing is that man is on the bench and God is in the dock. Bahnsen continues, it is this situation that must be rectified. The sinful attitude portrayed here needs to be redressed. Consequently, the infallible word of God must be presupposed by our apologetic without apologies. We defend a genuine system of authority that cannot be known except by divine revelation. This inscripturated word from God stands in judgment over all and is itself to be judged by no one. The submission to this authoritative revelation is caused not by impudent reasoning, but by the Holy Spirit. God's word is perfectly rational. However, it is not the autonomous rational man who receives it, but a humble man who knows better than to subject the Lord's sovereign prerogatives to an independent test for verification and an overriding bar of the human intellect. J.I. Packer is right at this point. Nor again may we present the faith as a philosophy to be accepted on grounds of rational demonstration. We must always declare it as revealed truth, divinely mysterious, and transcending reason's power to verify, to be received humbly on the authority of God. Faith involves the renunciation of intellectual self-sufficiency. We must always proclaim the gospel in a way that makes this clear. The natural man is in no position to pass judgment upon the reality and reliability of God's special revelation at the tribunal of reason. His powers of appraisal are incompetent. His standards are distorted. Our apologetic must never encourage the contrary opinion. The fact that God has delivered redemptive special revelation should itself indicate to us that we cannot overture the unregenerate to use principles of logic and science rooted in natural revelation to evaluate the Bible. It's so good. It goes on and on, but he essentially talks about exactly what you're saying, Stannis. He's saying that, look, to try and capitulate to the authority and the standards of the unbeliever and say, "Oh, we'll yeah, no, we can reason independently of God's revelation," is to give in already. It's to admit defeat at the outset. Stannis says that is good. Thanks. Yeah, no problem. You would love the works of Greg Bahnsen. Greg Bahnsen wrote several books on the topic. Pushing the Antithesis is good. Presuppositional Apologetics, Stated and Defended is good. And then he wrote another one I really like, just that's called, it's a green book. It's called I think it's just called Apologetics. But yeah, I think you'd really like Greg Bahnsen. He's excellent on this topic. Very, very good point. I'm impressed that you, to be honest, Dennis, I'm impressed that you've come to that conclusion, or you've come to that realization without reading Greg Bahnsen, to be honest, because he's kind of the father of that thought. Really, Van Til, Cornelius Van Til is the father of that thought, but Greg Bahnsen followed very closely in his footsteps. So that's awesome that God revealed that to you and kind of opened your eyes to see that. Very, very cool. Okay, so Jesus challenges directly, and he meets the Sadducees where they're at. Stannis says this: my conclusion of what was revealed to me is thus: even if a Christian had evidence that would convince the whole world and convert them, they wouldn't want to ultimately. Intrigued? Stannis, we're on the same page, brother. I believe that wholeheartedly. Look at all the miracles Jesus performed. He performed so many miracles in front of people, and they didn't believe. They still didn't believe, even though he performed miracles in front of them. That their default inclination was to not believe. That's the direction they started at. It took a supernatural work of God. As Jesus put it in John chapter 3, it takes being born again for your eyes to be opened to the evidence. You won't believe just because there's evidence, even if a miracle is done right in front of your face. People will come up with excuses, reasons, hallucinations, whatever. They'll come up with anything to not believe. It takes a supernatural work of the Holy Spirit to cause us to believe. You're dead on, Stannis. Dead on. So, for this one, I need to bring up verses 24, 27, and 25. Verse 24, 27, 25. Stannis asks, do you have Discord? I noticed your Discord icon. Yes, I do. I've got a Discord right here. And I use it to communicate with a Christian group on there and also interact with others. So yeah, I don't have a Discord that's dedicated to me or my channel or anything like that. I don't. I'm on other Discords interacting with others. Um, it would be cool. I would love to have my own Discord. I just don't know how to set it up. I don't know. And as you can see, I have one person watching me, or I don't have a huge following, so I've never gone out of my way to make a Discord. I would love to have one, but I've never put the effort, time, energy into one. Stannis says, "Yeah, I need Discord for my job in gaming." Yeah, so I use it just for communicating and interacting with other people, but I don't have my own Discord channel. I think it'd be cool though to have my own. Problems for future, Tanner. Create Discord. Oops. So Jesus meets them where they're at. He challenges them directly. And I can talk about that in regards to each of us. Now, first, meeting people where they're at. I'm just going to talk about building bridges here. And the next thing I'm going to talk about is that bridges are not always intellectual. And what I mean by that is on the topic of the dead being raised. Somebody may not believe it intellectually, but emotionally they believe it, right? Or want to believe it at least. It is perfectly legitimate as Christians to appeal to people's emotions, right? We don't want to overly emotionalize things, but almost any method we can use to bring people into the kingdom. I'm reminded of Paul saying he would become all things to all people. And so that'll kind of be a sub point in here. Stannis says, my job isn't bearing fruit at the moment, but our discussion is. I think God is directing me to focus on your work instead. Don't let me distract you, Stannis. Don't let me distract you. We all have things we need to do. Building bridges. Not always intellectual, all things to all people. And something I want to say, do I want to put it under this point or the next point? Meet them where they're at. I think I want to put it under this point. This is gospel. This is good news. This is part of the gospel. People want there to be an afterlife, even if they don't believe it. They want it to be true. And so it's a way we can appeal to them. And I think it's at this point that I'm going to bring up the philosopher. That'll be a nice little illustration. This tea is almost done. Going for it. Boom. Very nice. Little peach flavored white tea. Not bad at all. So I think this is a nicely developed subpoint. And now I'm going to go into the second subpoint, Jesus challenging them directly. And I've got all these verses. Let's see. And I'm doing he challenged them directly in two ways. First of all, he explicitly challenged them. You are not knowing the scriptures. You don't know the power of God. So he challenges them directly, but then he implies a doctrine they already don't believe about angels. Remember I said in discussion of the Sadducees didn't believe in angels at all. How interesting then that Jesus, in his conversation with them, references the angels. Look at this. Jesus replied, are you not in error because you do not know the scriptures or the power of God? When the dead rise, they will neither marry nor be given in marriage. They will be like the angels. and they don't believe in angels. Jesus knows that, and he chooses to tell them, hey, they're going to be like the angels anyway. Very, very interesting, I think. And so he challenges them directly in terms of verbally, and he challenges their worldview theologically. So I think I'll make that theological one a second subpoint. Got to be careful with multiplying subpoints because it can get messy. So when we talk to people, we need to challenge them verbally, but we also need to challenge their ideas or their worldview. Stannis says, after my military service, I went into college and triple majored in philosophy, speech communications, and psychology. After all that, I was deeply disappointed in the wisdom and knowledge of mankind. It all ends at death. Compared to God, it is almost insignificant. That is funny. I didn't notice that before about Jesus talking about the angels to the Pharisees and Sadducees in the sense that you just shared it. Yeah, it's little details like that, I think, that, I don't know, refresh, rejuvenate the word to us, And I like to bring those things out when they're present. And that's cool. I'm glad you shared about your testimony a little bit. That's very, very interesting that you went into all those areas of knowledge and you learned all of these things, and and you kind of came to the conclusion of the author of Ecclesiastes. It's meaningless, right? Very, very interesting. I've always thought those studies were very interesting, but it's one of those things that you're right, the wisdom of man, right? He thinks he's so smart. And I bet you enjoy First Corinthians chapter 1 and 2 because it talks about just the wisdom of man being stupider than the stupidity of God, right? And how much smarter God is than us, how much greater his knowledge is than ours, all of those things. Very, very good chapters, First Corinthians 1 and 2. So, Jesus challenges them directly. He does so verbally. He does so theologically. People need to know. Honesty, even if it hurts. This is something that Christians need to be about. So, what are the subtle differences between challenging people verbally and challenging people theologically? Because I want to bring out those subtle differences as I develop this main point. Stannis says, I am wondering if honesty that hurts is more of a reflection of our level of pride. The more it hurts, the more pride we have in our heart. You mean the more it hurts us when somebody is honest with us? I think there's certainly a correlation there. I feel like there would have to be. I don't know that I would say it's entirely true across the board, but there's definitely got to be some correlation there. Yeah, I'm with you on that. I'm following. Instead of saying people need to know, I'm going to put confrontation here. And then I'm going to put confrontation, and then people need to know under that. Restream messages me, congratulations, you've received 100 messages today with Restream chat. Well, thanks, Restream. I appreciate that. Stannis says, we'd have to explore examples that would demonstrate otherwise, I would suppose, before we could conclude that with surety. Yeah, no, I think you're right, Stannis. Like I said, I think there's definitely got to be a correlation with it, but I don't know that it answers everything right about it. I don't know that it gives us all the details, but there's certainly something interesting about that observation. So not only do we need to challenge people, just generally speaking, but we also need to challenge the content of their belief system, which is what this next piece does. And this one isn't just about raw confrontation, but this one is a little bit more about honesty, I think. So I'll put this one here. I'm reminded of a sermon by Charles Spurgeon, actually, in which, man, what did he say? I love Charles Spurgeon. Man, he's good. I'm trying to remember what he said. He talked about appealing to people in different ways. Someone you know on Twitch, hello again. Good to see you, someone. Thanks for joining. Look at the progress we've made. Look at that thing. That is full. That is a full mind map. I know I'm getting close to being done when I'm like stuffing little phrases in between all of the small tiny gaps. So this one's really coming along. I'm very pleased with the progress thus far. Introduction done, almost finished with the first main point. Second main point's gonna be relatively easy, and so was the third main point. So we're killing it, absolutely killing it. But I'm trying to remember this quote from Charles Spurgeon. He talked about appealing to people in different ways. He talked about scaring people. He talked about exhorting people. He talked about encouraging people. He talked about, he talked about he'll use any means possible to get the gospel across to somebody. And I'd like to make reference to that because I'm talking in my sermon about using any means possible in terms of appealing to people. That building bridges with them isn't always an intellectual exercise. And so that's something I want to try and do, but I can't remember the quote. You know what? It might be in a book written. Do I have this one? Steve Lawson wrote a book on Charles Spurgeon, and I was hoping I had it in Logos. I don't. Because I remember hearing it in a Steve Lawson sermon, and he was quoting Charles Spurgeon at this point. I can find it. I know I can. Let's see. He said something about like your mother prayed for you, and yet still you do not come. Ooh, that's a lot. Let's try your mother near pray. Let's try that. Ooh, we're getting close. This is a reasonable number of hits. No. I can find this quote. It's going to be good. Man, Charles Spurgeon was such a good preacher. Man, this is killing me. I can't remember this quote. Might be this. No. Might be this one. Heaven and Hell. I know he uses the word compel. It's just too much. Compel you. Ugh, that's still a lot. Oh, here it is. Shepherd's notes from lectures to my students. Yeah, here it is. Those called. First, I must find you out. Secondly, I will go to work to compel you to come in. If you read the verses that precede the text, you will find an amplification of this command. Go quickly into the streets, lanes, etc. This is it. Compel them to come in. Yeah, this is it. First, I must find you out. I love it. Now let's see if I can't find the specific sermon now. Yeah, New Park Street pulpit. Oh, this is it. Compel them to come in. Number 227. Yeah, this is it. First, I must find you out. Secondly, I will go to work to compel you to come in. He talks about this, and then he basically says, if you're not compelled, and now to the work, directly to the work, unconverted, unrecoiled, unregenerate men and women, I am to compel you to come in. And then he talks about compelling them, and he tries to compel them, literally. And then he says, essentially, I'm changing my tactic. But do you spurn it? Do you still refuse it? Then I must change my tone a minute. I will not merely tell you the message and invite you as I do with earnestness and sincere affection. I will still go further. Sinner, in God's name, I command you to repent and believe. And he talks about command. And then he continues, but do you turn away and say you will not be commanded? Then again, will I change my note? If that avails not, all other means shall be tried. My brother, I come to you simple of speech. I exhort you to flee to Christ. He goes on and on. I know not what arguments to use with you. I appeal to your own self-interest. So, my poor friend, would it not be better for you to be reconciled to the God of heaven than to be his enemy? What are you getting by opposing God? Are you happier for being his enemy? Answer, pleasure seeker. Hast thou found delights in that cup? Answer me, self-righteous man. Hast thou found rest for the sole of thy foot and all of thy works? And he just goes on and on. Continues. Come, I am not put off by your rebuffs. If my exhortation fails, I must come up with something else. My brother, I entreat you to stop and consider. He goes on and on. Yeah, it's so good. And now, is it all in vain? Will you not now come to Christ? Then what more can I do? I have but one more resort, and that shall be tried. I can be permitted to weep for you. I can be allowed to pray for you. You shall scorn the address if you like. You shall laugh at the preacher. You shall call him a fanatic if you will. He will not chide you. He will bring no accusation against you to the great judge. Your offense, so far as he is concerned, is forgiven before it is committed. But you will remember that the message that you are rejecting this morning is a message from one who loves you, and it is given you also by the lips of one who loves you. You will recollect that you may play your soul away with the devil, and that you may listlessly think it a matter of no importance, but there lives at least one who is in earnest about your soul. Oh, it's so good. So this is the sermon I was thinking about. Compel them to come in. And I'm just going to put this down. He starts with compelling them, and he even tells them, I'm changing tactic because you won't listen. And he changes tactic, and then he changes tactic again, and he changes tactic again. So that might be something I reference. And in fact, I am going to grab some quotes out of it, just in case. First he compels them. He compels, then he commands. Sinner, I command you. What a good sermon. Spurgeon, compel them. So first he compels, then he commands, then he exhorts, command. And the point here being, we will use any means necessary to bring people to Christ, right? That's the idea that we want to get at with this one. This is where Paul says he's become all things to all people. That's what it actually looks like. That's what Spurgeon is getting at in this sermon. He entreats. What a powerful sermon this must have been to hear. Incredible. I wonder what it was like to hear Spurgeon preach. And then he says finally, what do I have left? I can weep for you. I can pray for you. And that's kind of the tactic that I'm going to encourage our people to use. Not necessarily they have to do all this, but to realize that when you're interacting with somebody, you don't have to meet them on their supposed grounds, right? You're talking with somebody and they're like, well, I don't believe this or I don't believe that, and all of these different ideas. And in reality, you don't have to capitulate to what they say. They don't even know what they think. They don't even know what they believe and why they believe it. And you can appeal to their heart, you can appeal to their emotion, you can appeal to their intellect, you can appeal to the whole person and use whatever road you need to use whatever tool you need to that's available to you to get to the heart of the matter. So first, believe that the dead are raised and that it affects how you live. You need to believe that too. So that's the first thing. But once you believe that, you need to convince others of that, speak to others about it. And then maybe that's when I can reference Spurgeon. That might be a good time. That's where I'll put it for now. It might come earlier, though. It might come back here with the all things to all people. Well, you can see there's a lot of blue there. Point number 1 is ballooning, but I think I've got all of the important aspects in there. Point number 2 now, the life to come. Life to come. And I wanted to say 2 things about the life to come. First, it's not what we would expect, in some way, at very least, because the Sadducees' whole argument is premised on the fact that the life to come is quite similar to our current life. And Jesus criticizes that. He says, no. Essentially, the kingdom of heaven is not at all like you conceive. Human beings that are resurrected aren't at all like you conceive. They're neither married nor given in marriage, blah, 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 right? So, the life to come is not at all what we would expect compared to their parable. And it's at this point that I can maybe reference 2 Corinthians 12, 2-4. Let's see. Because Paul essentially says he can't describe it, right? So, it simultaneously can't be described. And there's some sort of continuity between the life to come and our lives now. And we need to get that balance. So, both are important aspects. And I'm putting an illustration here. When I first became a Christian, I asked Jess if there would be video games in heaven. which is, it's funny that I'm bringing this up now on Twitch. But I asked Jess if she thought that would be the case, and she laughed at me. But it kind of demonstrates this idea of us conceiving or thinking of heaven in similar terms to how we live this life. And at this point, I want to demonstrate for people that the afterlife isn't like what we would expect. The life to come isn't like what we would expect. That's the same mistake that the Sadducees made. They thought the afterlife was going to be just like this life, and that's why they were able to come up with this weird conundrum about a woman who remarries 7 times, right? And Jesus criticizes them and essentially says, look, the afterlife is not at all like you think it is. They're neither married nor given in marriage, right? And so that's a caution against making the afterlife too much like our current life, right? Conceiving of it in that way. But there are some similarities between this life and the afterlife. And this is a balance that we need to hold. So Peter ends, for example, we saw this yesterday. Continuity will exist between the earthly kingdom and the eternal state. This new earth will be productive and peaceful, and God's original purpose for the earth will be fulfilled. The new heaven and new earth are frequently pictured together. Since God dwells with man on the new earth, and since God's home is heaven, the new earth becomes part of heaven. The new earth will be like Eden. So you've got this balance where there's a sense in which the new heavens and new earth go together, but there's also a sense in which they're very different. And we need to have that balance in our own theology about the afterlife, the life to come. And so I think what I'll do with this point is I will point out that there's a ditch on both sides of the road, and what I'm going to hopefully be able to show people is know thyself. If you tend into one ditch, i.e., the afterlife's completely different, it's completely new, if you tend in towards that ditch, then you need to work to think about the continuity between this life and the life to come. But if you tend towards the ditch of, you know, the afterlife's just like this life, we're going to, you know, be doing exactly the same sort of stuff in heaven as we do here, then you are going into another ditch and need to caution people against that. And so the goal is to give people a balanced perspective on the life to come. And part of what I need to get at here is we ought to live. So I need to emphasize those aspects of the here and now that echo into the kingdom, that have continuity. And after emphasizing those aspects, I think that will kind of promote and encourage people to think properly about these ideas. And you know what I need to do here is I need to talk about kind of the popular books of visiting heaven and things like that. And I can even ask kind of the question, what is it like? we kind of have this insatiable desire to know what heaven's going to be like. And instead, we need to know the principles that Jesus teaches us about heaven, and then simply trust, have faith. Man, this sermon's getting stuffed to the brim. Like I said, I can tell when I'm getting too much information because I can't fit anything anywhere anymore. Okay. So, I'll talk about the life to come, and I'll reference the fact that people write a lot of books about this subject. They go into it in a lot of detail. I visited heaven, I saw this, I saw that. And so I'll talk about books like that, and then I'll say, but we need to keep a couple of things in mind. First of all, heaven is not what we would expect. That's the mistake that the Sadducees make, and I can go into the detail on that. Then I need to talk about the fact that there is continuity between this life and heaven. So I might say something like, however, that's not the full picture, something like that. And essentially, I'm not really going to answer the question of what heaven is like. I'm instead going to talk about the important aspect that you simultaneously believe that heaven is incomprehensible and different from what we experience here, and heaven is similar to what we experience here. We need to believe both truths at the same time. And for people that like, perfect theology that always lines up and never has any difficulties to it, that may not be fun to have to believe those ideas, but I'm convinced that's what the scripture teaches on the subject. The problem is my second subpoint is not really found in the text itself, so I'm going to struggle with exegetical sufficiency. But I think it makes sense because this is a piece of Jesus meeting people where they're at. The Sadducees' tendency was to think that the afterlife was very similar. And so in correcting them, he tries to show them how different it is. But if he were interacting with people who thought the afterlife was very different, he might teach them that it's somewhat similar. Again, trying to correct people and balance them out. So I think people can understand that. I don't think people will feel I'm stretching the truth at that point. And then I'll just need some verses, some short verses that kind of emphasize continuity between heaven and earth. And then I can kind of emphasize from that point the continuity. So I think that'll be good. I'm not too happy with departing from the strictly exegetical, but it's a theological point that while it's not explicitly mentioned in the text, it's kind of essential to understanding the text properly. So my application for this section is going to be identify your tendency and steer appropriately. If you tend to think the afterlife is going to be very similar to this life, then you might need to contemplate more the otherworldly nature of the afterlife. If you tend to think the afterlife is going to be very different from this life, you might need to contemplate the similarity. So let's see. Man, all these ideas need to be included. It's getting quite cramped in here. Let's go with this. Okay, I think that's good. I'll point out there's a ditch on both sides of the road. We need to get our balance right. And so my application will be identify your tendency and steer appropriately. And again, this matters. It's not just an intellectual exercise because how you view the afterlife is going to affect how you live now. And I might use the phrase already and not yet, since this is a common phrase that tries to help us understand how eschatology plays into our views at this point. Is my chat frozen, or did I just soothe you guys to sleep with my voice? Let me check real quick. I hope you guys haven't been trying to chat to me this whole time. I haven't had a message in like 40 minutes. Stannis says, I am working and listening. All right. Thank you, Stannis. I appreciate that. It's no problem. If you're working and just listening to my soothing voice, that's fine. I just wanted to make sure it didn't like freeze and you guys were trying to chat to me. Okay. See, this isn't very self-evident. This is self-evident. It's straight from the text. This isn't. So I need to come up with some verses, some texts that support this idea. So Enns uses the new heavens and new earth being pictured together in Isaiah 65 and 66. 2 Peter 3:13, new heavens and new earth. Revelation 21:1. And that might be sufficient. I could maybe just quote these verses and not go there and just talk about how they often incorporate the new heavens and new earth. And we are in the new earth right now. It's being reconstituted. It's already and not yet, but we are in the new earth. And the new heavens are still to come, but we are in the process right now of renewing the earth. And so once the earth is renewed appropriately and Christ is happy with that. God is happy with that. The new heavens and new earth will be united, and that is going to constitute the heavenly realm or the life to come that we think of. I think that'll be sufficient. I think people will buy that argumentation. Again, I've got so much material at this point that I can't be like, let's turn to Isaiah real quick, and you can see this. Blah blah blah. People will recognize that phrase, new heavens and new earth, new heavens and new earth, and I can just reference those passages, and I think people will buy that understanding. We're not just waiting for heaven to come. We are in the process of renewing the earth, and God will unite the new heavens with this new earth. Bloodbound, what is up? Bloodbound says, wow, been a while. Yeah, you're right, Bloodbound. I went and looked at my streaming history, and I haven't streamed since December, except for this week. So good to see you. You haven't fallen off the face of the earth. I haven't fallen off the face of the earth. So good to see you, Bloodbound. I'm glad you could jump in here and we could interact a little bit. Bloodbound says, yeah, same. Yeah, it's been crazy. Yeah, my life got crazy and I got out of the habit of it. This is a good habit for me, so I'm glad I could get back into it. Mr. Fixit71 says, I like the ditch example. Very hard to balance the idea of what the life to come will be. We have all been given greatly varied snapshots of what it will be like. Exactly, Mr. Fixit. We have a ditch on either side of the road, and we have a tendency to fall into one or another. Some people think of heaven as being otherworldly completely, and some people think of heaven as being very much like this world. And we want to have the proper balance so that we can live our lives appropriately. Very, very good point, Mr. Fixit. Bloodbound says, yeah, I've been doing some stuff in college, doing software classes, professional soft skills program. I just started, but it's bound to get harder. Yeah, that's awesome. Good to see you again, Bloodbound. I'm going to be streaming more often. I know I've said that a couple times and then I keep falling off the face of the earth, but I found this community and this is so helpful for me. Look, Bloodbound, I am going to finish my Sunday sermon on a Wednesday. That never happens, right? And it's just so good for me. The way my personality is, I need to be doing this. And honestly, having a community like this to help me is really good for accountability for me. So Bloodbound is now hosting my stream with 1 viewers. Thank you, Bloodbound. I appreciate that. And like I said, this accountability is so good for me. It's so helpful for me, and I appreciate this community. Mr. Fixit 71 now following. Thank you, Mr. Fixit. Appreciate it. You guys seen my puppy before? Rory, up up. She fell off. Come on. She's a corgi. Look, she has no clue what's going on. She's deeply confused. Good girl. Yeah, good girl. That's a good puppy. I love corgis. So yeah, good to see you guys. Good to interact with you guys. I appreciate it all. Bloodbound says nice pupper. Yeah, she's a cutie. I like corgis because they are simultaneously a small dog and a big dog. They they can do a lapdog things and they can like go on a walk like a big dog would. So that's awesome. Bloodbound says corgis are quirky. That's for sure. She's a little cutie though. All right. Already and not yet. I'll reference the verses. New heavens and new earth. New heavens and new earth. Actually, I'm going to put this right next to these other verses. New heavens and new earth. With the verses, so I can talk about that. Mr. Fixit asks, will you be posting the sermon? Yes, I will, Mr. Fixit. Most of my sermons get posted on Tuesdays. So what I'm going to do is I will preach this. Let me just look at the calendar real quick. I'm going to preach this on Sunday the 23rd, and then it will probably be uploaded on Tuesday the 25th. And so you can grab it off of our church website on Tuesday the 25th. If you go down in the Twitch, it says my sermons. If you click on that, that'll take you to the place where all my sermons are uploaded, and you'll be able to hear me preach this very sermon that I'm preparing right now. Bloodbound says, also compliments on the background, not the best, but better than a pixelated blurry background. Yeah, it's my living room. It's a little different. I've always blurred it out in the past. So Mr. Fixit says, thanks, looking forward to it. Yeah, no, I'll be streaming next week as well, Mr. Fixit. So I'll be encouraged to hear what you think about it and how you enjoyed it and all that type of stuff. I'm always looking for feedback, and like I said, this accountability of streaming these and talking with people, all of that is very, very good for me and very helpful for me. So I need to keep it up. It's we talk about spiritual disciplines, reading your Bible, praying, and things like that. This is a spiritual discipline for me. Streaming this, getting these things done, very, very helpful. There's been way too many times I've been Saturday night at the witching hour trying to finish the sermon, and it's not good. It's not healthy, and it doesn't help me to deliver the best sermon that I can. So I do want to mention this, that we're not just waiting to go to heaven. And this is something I'm passionate about, so I don't need to put too many words in here because I know once I get going on this topic, I'm just going to go. So I'll put enough to remind myself of what to talk about, and then I'll leave it. I think that's appropriate. Boom. So that's point number 2 finished. I wish I had more time to go into more depth on those things, but I don't. So that's point number 2 finished. Give me 1 second, guys. I have some people coming over and I just need to figure out what time. Bloodbound, guess what came in the mail today? I got a green screen. So this is my living room I'm streaming from, but I've got a green screen, so when I stream from my desktop downstairs, I can set up some cool backgrounds and stuff. We'll see what I come up with. But like you said, a lot better than a super blurry background. All right, point number 2 is finished, guys. And point number 3 is mostly exhortation, right? It's going to kind of be like encouraging. So most of the content of the sermon is going to be in points 1 and 2. Point number 3 is kind of wrapping up the ideas, and it's going to be a lot of trying to motivate and encourage people in this, exhorting people to follow these ideas. And so, wow, I really like this idea though too. I'm going to put this in here. The life that is to come has already begun. I like that idea. Okay. Running out of room. So, the idea here is that God is life. That is actually Jesus' argument in this passage. He says this: Are you not in error because you do not know the scriptures or the power of God? I'm right here, guys. When when the dead rise, they will neither marry nor be given in marriage. They will be like angels in heaven. Now, about the dead rising, have you not read in the book of Moses, in the account of the burning bush, how God said to them, I am the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob. He is not God of the dead, but of the living. You are badly mistaken. The primary point that Jesus is making is that we serve a living God. Our God is living. Therefore, we ought to, as I put it, live, right? So because God is life, so too his people live. And what I'm going to get at is true in the life to come, but this is also true now. True in the life to come, but also true now. Hey, Bloodbound, I found Pastor Dustin's Twitch, and I was interacting with him, and he plugged me into the GMA Discord, God Mode Activated, and I've been interacting with those guys on there. And you turned me on to those guys, so I appreciate that. And so maybe something like will you live? Again, trying to be motivational here at the end. Will you live? Okay. And maybe something like stop just waiting to go to heaven. Act now. What actions should I take? Well, what's God doing? He's renewing the heavens and the earth. So we should be about renewing the earth. How is that done? Through gospel proclamation, through the establishing of his kingdom. Hey guys, I hate to say it, but my company that was going to be coming over is coming over right now. So I'm going to have to take off soon. It's almost perfect timing because I'm about done with the sermon. How long have we been streaming? Let me just check this. Streaming 2 hours, an hour 55 minutes. So streaming 2 hours, and I've really enjoyed interacting with you guys. Stannis, you've been awesome. Thanks for jumping in and helping me these last 2 days. Really enjoyed interacting with you. Mr. Fixit, thanks for swinging by. I hope to see you next week, especially after I preach this and we can chat more about what you thought of the sermon. And Bloodbound, so good to see you again, brother. I'm sorry I disappeared, and I hope I can be more active about this in the future. It's very, very helpful for me. And thanks so much, guys, for interacting and popping in tonight. I'll I'll finish up the sermon, but I'm probably not going to stream it, and just continue from there. But yeah, I really, really appreciate interacting with you guys, and having that having a good stream. You guys contribute so much to this. Stana says, "Open your heart to Jesus, reform your heart to God, obey Jesus, obey God's commandments." Absolutely. These are the basics. These are the fundamentals of the Christian walk and the Christian life, and that's what we need to be about. Thank you for your input, Stannis. It's very, very helpful. Mr. Fixit says, "Have a great night. It was an absolute joy to see you dive into the Word." Oh, I'm so glad to hear that, Mr. Fixit. I know this content isn't riveting in some, like I was telling Stannis yesterday, I'm not blowing away zombies, right? And that can be fun to watch, but I got to write sermons, and if anyone wants to watch me write them, then I'm happy to interact with them. And you guys were such an encouragement to me this evening. Have a great night. Have a great rest of your week. I may stream later in the week, but it probably won't be sermon prep. It might be something different. And I hope to see you guys later. Take care. God bless. Bye now.